Hi, it's Jan Howell, here with another face mask tutorial. I'm always trying to make the face mask making process easier and more efficient, and this new center pleat design is comfortable on the face, has a little bit more room for breathing, and of course has the adjustable ear loop. I'll show you how to do that. Very easy to do, no hardware needed, comfortable to wear. Let's get started. Let's go over some of the items and things that you'll need to make your face mask. Of course, you'll need your fabric, a print or color for the front and one for the back so you can tell which is the front and back of your mask. And you can add an inner lining of fabric for a filter. This is an upcycled pillowcase, which is a tight weave that acts as a really nice filter if you want to add that third layer. I have cut these pieces 9 by 7 inches. You'll need a rotary cutter if you have one. They're nice to have, but not necessary. A pair of fabric scissors, either pins or fabric clips. For the nose wire, if you're adding a nose wire, I really like these plastic coated twist ties, and I'll put the link in the description. Very nice. They don't come apart or fall apart when you wash them. Or you can use pipe cleaner, craft pipe cleaner, cut to 4 inches. A chalk pen is nice. A seam gauge for measuring. To make the center pleat process really easy, cut a piece of cardstock 1.5 inches by 11 inches and mark down the center of the strip, which is 3/4 of an inch from the edge, or 2 centimeters each way. This will make that process go really quickly and easily. And you'll need some masking tape and your pre-cut and pre-made ear loops. I have a tutorial on showing you how to do that. I will go through that here in this tutorial as well. You'll also need an iron and some kind of turning stick or device. And you'll need your sewing machine. What makes these ear loops so comfortable is the soft, comfortable fabric that's stretchy, just like elastic, but a lot more comfortable. Now you can make your own strips by cutting out simple knit fabric, upcycled t-shirts or leggings material, and I have a tutorial that goes over all the details for that. Or you can just buy it. I have found a product that I really like, and it's called FARMYARN, and I'll put in the link description below where you can get it, that uses 100% recycled fabric. So they've taken fabric and cut it into strips and put it on a bolt. Very reasonably priced, comes in all kinds of colors, and so much more comfortable than elastic. You'll need to cut 2 strips 9 inches and 2 strips 6 inches. Start by taking the short strip. So we're not going to pull it really tight right now. We're just going to kind of leave that for a second. Set that down. Make a knot at the end. And that's just going to be the knot that hangs down. And this end, we're going to thread it through the hole of that loop. The strip that pulls, cinch it up so that slides, so it has some resistance. We don't want it to be too loose and you don't want it to be too tight. So find a resistance that feels good for you to pull and adjust your mask. This knotted end is going to be free, and this end and these 2 ends are the ends that we're going to sew into the mask. So I'm going to pull that out to the end. The reason we knot it is that so it doesn't come undone when washing your mask. So I'm going to pull it to the end so that we have more room to sew that in. So I'm just going to take my scissors and cut those off even. these ends are going to be sewn into the mask. So I'm going to set that set aside and make the other. Let me show you how to put it all together. Establish which part of the mask is going to be the top of your mask with the nose wire, and just keep that in mind because we are going to insert the long part of the ear loop at the top and these two little ends at the bottom. A tip for applying the ear loop is, so we want this part that we pull, the end with the knot, to be at the bottom of the mask, and these little things not twisted so that they're lying not really nice in the finished mask. To correctly place the ear loops, we want them to be placed just inside the seam allowance. The top of the mask, we're going to have a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and everything else is going to be a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And a 3/8 inch seam allowance on the side. And the bottom is also a 3/8 seam allowance. After you make the first one, you'll just be able to eyeball it. So I'm going to take the ear loop and place it just below and have it stick out just a bit so we're making sure we're catching it in the seam allowance. Fold those pieces over the top and clamp it in place. And these bottom pieces, we'll place those just above the seam allowance on the bottom. Ideally, you want the knot to be just outside of that seam allowance. We don't want to catch it in the seam. So I'm going to bring it down to that seam allowance sticking out. And this little tag right here, this is where your tape will come in handy. Take a piece of masking tape, and so we're not catching that in the seam, you can just tape that down. Works really well. Then I'll flip those pieces right sides together, remember, and clamp it in place. Do the same thing on the other side. We're going to sew around the mask, the edges of the mask, but we're going to leave like a 3-inch hole at the bottom where we're not going to sew. That allows us to turn it inside out. So I'm going to encourage you to put a few pins at the bottom, or clips if you want to, just to help remind you to keep this bottom part open, because there are so many times when I'm just not thinking and I sew this and I end up having to unpick. So that'll help me to remember to keep that open. The top of the mask, we're going to leave a 1/2 inch seam allowance. That will give us some more room to make the casing for the nose clip. It'll all make sense in just a second here. We're going to start at the top, sew down, sew here, back stitch, leave this open, and sew around. I have put pink thread in my bobbin and my sewing machine, and we're just using a basic straight stitch. 3/8 inch seam allowance, which is usually just the edge of your presser foot. Back stitch at the beginning. Come to the corner, leave your needle down, lift up your presser foot and pivot. And this pin reminds me that I need to stop there, back stitch. and begin sewing at the other pin. I'm going to stop at the 1/2 inch, leave my needle down, lift up my presser foot and pivot. And back stitch. So to make a casing for the nose wire that will keep it from shifting around when you're washing it, we're going to measure 2.5 inches or 6.5 centimeters from the edge. We'll be sewing just a little box, which will be 1/4 inch from this top seam. Just turn your hand wheel toward you to bring your needle down so that you can make sure that you know where you're at with your needle. So at this point, open up the 2 print fabrics, slide the nose wire in between into that little casing, and then we're just going to sew the end closed. So now we have that enclosed nose wire, which is really nice. I'm going to take my scissors and clip the corners and cut off the excess Earloop fabric. Now we'll just turn it inside out. Open up the 2 colored prints. Take a little turning device, poke out the corners. So this bottom opening needs to be sewn closed, so we're going to fold the seam allowance under and press in place. Use your fingers to pull out the edges of the seam. Now we're ready to make that center pleat. Flip it over so the wrong side of the mask, the back of the mask, is facing up. Take your template and just eyeball the center. You can measure if you want, but I'm just going to eyeball it into the center. Fold the mask down over the template and fold it up so the bottom of the fold lines up with that line that we have drawn. Slide out your template, clip it in place, the sides and the top of the mask will have a 3/8 inch seam allowance, and the bottom we're just going to do a top stitch 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Threads. Make sure you're subscribing to the channel. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. We'll see you in the next class.